behalf of my mom and my wonderful and loving family that has been so awesome these last few days, I want to thank all of you for being here with us today as we celebrate the life of our dearest dad, Pappy, Coach Stroud. He would be so humbled and so honored to see you all here, as are we. And we've been so blessed by your words of comfort, your support over the last few days. And I know Dad would appreciate your continued prayers and support for us, and especially his dearest, Patsy, in the days to come. He loved you, and we love you, and we are so grateful that you were in his life and are in our lives today. I do not consider myself an eloquent speaker, and I am a lot funnier after a few shots of tequila. Maybe after you've had a few shots. But I wanted to say just a few words about my dad. And if any of you have something to say or a story to tell, please feel free to do so. Just remember we are in a chat. Let me first say that if there was ever a little girl who adored her daddy, I was that little girl. To me, he was the most handsome, the strongest, the smartest, and simply the finest man that ever lived. And he still is. I never felt safer than when, as a small child, I would sit in his lap, just watching TV and being in his powerful and marvelous presence. My mom tells me that when I was a tiny newborn, Dad insisted that she bring my little crib into the bedroom and put it on his side of the bed so he could keep his hand on me throughout the night while I slept. And throughout my young life, even though he was often gone to work long before I got up in the morning and home from work long after I had gone to bed, I have always felt safe and protected and loved. A few years ago, I asked him, Dad, what was the scariest day of your life? He pondered for only a moment before saying, the day I got married. This profound sense of responsibility as a husband and father and grandfather is what truly defined him. Second only to the one way he believed he could best fulfill that responsibility, which was to be a football coach. He was the ultimate provider and protector, and it was upon this foundation of safety and security that I flourished and my sister flourished. And today we join him in that sense of responsibility and protection and love for our beautiful children, his grandchildren, three truly amazing people of whom he was so, so proud. When I was 4 or 5 years old, I had a little bike with training wheels that one day I decided to ship them off since all the other kids in the neighborhood did not use training wheels. Dad was working in the yard or something that day, and I asked him to take the training wheels off my bike. I guess he was not as convinced as I was that I should take them off, and so he told me he would take them off, but made it very clear that I must learn to ride the bike without them because he was not putting them back on. That's fine with me. I agreed to the deal. That sounded fine. And so the training wheels came off, and of course, after a few unsuccessful attempts to ride the bike, I promptly asked Dad, can you put the training wheels back on? I can't do it. To my surprise, he said no. And reminded me of the deal. I think I told him, well then fine, I'll just go inside and do something else. And he told me I could not go inside until I learned how to ride the bike. And so reluctantly, I spent the remainder of the day trying to ride that bike with no success, lots of falls and frustration, and I tried and tried and tried until the day went by and suddenly it was dark. I was so relieved the long day was over and the struggling was over with that dang bike, and finally I'd be able to go inside. I ran to the door and tried to go in, but alas, the door was locked. And despite my knocking and pleading and my crying and then the crying of my mom as she watched in disbelief, it remained locked. And so with no other alternative, but with every ounce of determination in me, I walked back out into the dark, picked up that bike and tried one more time, and almost immediately experienced the thrill when you finally get it, and you're gliding along on a bike with no training wheels. And so while my dad did not teach me how to ride a bike that day, he taught me something much more valuable, which was to never make a deal you can't keep, and to never ever give up on your goals, even when it's dark and you feel like crying. I know these football players know what I'm talking about right now. I know that when you were a player for Dad, You learned how to play football, but that in his own unique way, he taught you things that were even more valuable, like commitment and dedication and discipline, and pushing yourself beyond your limits at every game and every practice, and never ever giving up, even when it got dark and you felt like crying. I know he was more than a coach, and that he was a father to you. And so I feel like you are the brothers my sister and I never had. And we are all Dad's legacy. He was hard on us when he needed to be, and we are better people for it. Because of him, we are winners in this game of life, just like Dad intended. Growing up, we honestly didn't see my dad very much because he worked so hard to win football games, and I wouldn't change that for anything. But to be able to spend time with him these last few years, just talking and hanging out as adults and friends, was such a gift, and I will treasure that forever. So you all heard about Claude King. Like two otherwise well-behaved little boys who cannot help but get into trouble when they get together, the fun and the humor seemed exponential when Dad and Paul were together. Those two somehow turned everything into a party, including the 12-hour labor and 3 a.m. delivery of my first daughter, Holland. Both of them were there for the whole shebang, and everyone but Holland and me seemed to be having a pretty good time. By the way, Claude, you and Dad still owe the nurses at the Renaissance Women's Center 2 pepperoni pizzas that mysteriously disappeared from the break room around. I'm sure there was some alcohol involved. Seriously though, Claude, you brought my dad such joy and delight. And words cannot describe his love for you. We love you too. And we are your family, and your family is our family forever. I'd like to close my time by reciting a poem. That may seem cheesy, but there's a reason I want to do it. One day, about a year ago, we were sitting on the back porch having a cold beer in the evening. In the course of conversation with my mom and me, my dad began reciting this poem. And when I asked about it, he told me that when he was in the 7th grade, his English teacher gave the assignment to choose a poem to study and to recite in front of class. My dad chose the poem Invictus. He could still recite it to this day, and I was so inspired by that and by the poem that I decided to memorize it too. I intended to recite it for him, but I did not get a chance to, and so if you'll indulge me, I'd like to do that today. I might have to cheat him, but I'll try not to. Out of the night that covers me, black as the pit from pole to pole, I thank whatever gods may be for my unconquerable soul. In the fell clutch of circumstance, I have not winced nor cried aloud. Beneath the bludgeonings of chance, my head is bloody, but unbowed. Beyond this place of wrath and tears looms but the horror of the shade, and yet the menace of the years finds and shall find me unafraid.